Hey guys, I've recently started working with some high school athletes, and I'm seeing some consistencies in their training that have been really frustrating for me to watch. So I want to talk about some considerations that we should be making whenever we're working with our high school athletes. Uh, and it's important to remember as I go throughout this video that we're working with kids that are in the 12 to 19-year-old range, varsity and junior varsity athletes, and we're talking about athletes whose goal is not to compete at a powerlifting meet, it's to get stronger so that they can be better at their sport. The big problem that I want to cover today that I've been seeing a ton of is going too heavy too often and doing way more volume than is necessary to make progress. I commonly will see the kids come in and do some type of heavy top set in the 85 to 105% range, and they're just grinding it out with terrible form, just trying to survive and make the lift. And then they're doing a lot of back off sets, whether it's bodybuilding hypertrophy type work or some type of conditioning work, and they're just doing too much. Um, there's no reason for the kids, one, to be coming in and going this heavy, and there's no reason for the kids to be coming in and doing so much volume. I'm talking, you know, 20 to 30 sets in a week. And while many of these kids still make progress, I think it's not optimal, and I think the kids are essentially just surviving the workload that they're being given, and they're making the tiniest amount of progress that can be made because they're being run into the ground essentially. There's a bunch of different reasons. I'll go over a couple that we don't need to kill these kids. We don't need to give them so much work and push them so hard as far as the intensity of their lifts, especially in the squat, bench, and deadlift. Um, the big one is it doesn't allow for form correction or practicing good form at all. When you're lifting in the 95 to 105% range, you can't make adjustments in between reps. There's no thinking going on. You're just trying not to die, essentially. And that's really not what we want to be ingraining in these kids. We want to be taking the time to build the form and put them through good movement patterns that are going to keep them healthy and injury free so that they can focus more on their sport specific practice. The second one is lifting at 100% of your capability or even past that is very stressful on the body. And while the kids will recover and make progress most of the time just because they're eating a lot and they're young so they can recover from it, there's no reason to be doing this. When you're coming in and you're having the kids do 10 sets, 15 sets, 20 sets just in one session, they're going to be toast afterwards, and the quality of their training and their sport specific practice, whether it's football, wrestling, whatever it is, they're going to be burnt out going into that practice. And so we're taking away from what we're trying to make them better at, which just doesn't make any sense. There's an increased risk for injury. There's a couple different reasons for this, but the two that I'll go over just quickly is one, the terrible movement pattern. Like I said before, if you're going in the 85 to 105% range, that's pretty heavy, especially for kids who haven't been lifting very long and haven't ingrained good movement patterns in the squat, the deadlift, or the clean. And so they're just trying to survive and they're not practicing and getting good form, and so the knees are collapsing, the back is rounding, the shoulders are shooting up off the bench when they're benching, and so this is going to increase the risk for injury. And in addition to just having a bad movement pattern, the body is extremely fatigued, and when the more we get past the point where the body can recover, the farther we push past that recovery point, the closer we are to, not the closer we are, but the higher the risk of injury gets. So we really need to watch out for that. The last consideration about just doing too much is that there's no room for growth. If the kids are coming in and they're doing a ton of sets and a ton of reps with a ton of weight, where are they going to go in 5 years when they need to do more volume to make more progress? Are they going to be doing 30 and 40 sets a week? What are we going to have them do? If we can have the kids come in and hit sub-maximal weights, it can still be relatively heavy so that they can get a good stimulus out of it and get that strength gain that we're looking for. But if we can have them work in the 75% range or the 70% range, it's going to allow them to practice their form. It's going to allow them to get work in, but not so much work that they're leaving the gym burnt out and fatigued going into their sport-specific practice. And so those are some things we need to be considering when we're handling these youth athletes. And there's some other considerations, but those are the big ones. And just some take-home points, if you do have youth athletes, these are some priorities that we should really be focusing on. One is do not injure the athletes. I see it so many times, and I've experienced it myself, where the kids don't even get out of high school without injuries. And if they're going into college and they have aspirations about playing professional sports, but they're too broken to do that, I mean, what was the point of us working with them in the gym in the first place? So we really need to work on not injuring them by being more careful about the workload that we're using and the intensity of the workload. The second one is ingrain good movement techniques. Again, this is done by not going so heavy and not doing so much. When we're going super heavy and the kids are fatigued, their form's going to break down and it's going to be terrible. And every time we do a repetition with terrible form, that's ingraining a movement pattern in them that is going to be harder and harder to correct as time goes on. And build the athletes. Don't constantly test them. When we come into the gym and we hit a heavy 1 rep max, that does give us a strength stimulus, but we're testing ourselves. We're pushing ourselves as hard as we possibly can in that lift. And there's just no reason for us to be doing that. The kids are in the gym to be built up so that they can be better at their sport. There's no reason for us to be testing their 1 rep maxes all the time, or even testing a 5 rep max or a 3 rep max. You can test the kids' strength without pushing them to the limit. You can test a new 5 rep max at 75%, and if it's 10 pounds more than the kid did 6 weeks ago, they got stronger. So there's no reason for us to come and try and hit a new 1 rep max every single week or every month or anything like that. So those are some considerations that we should have in mind whenever we're working with our youth athletes. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Check out the links in the description below.